Our darkness is never darkness in your sight. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. I'd like to share a reading this morning with you, a poem by poet Patricia Fargnoli, and it's entitled Winter Grace. If you have seen the snow under the lamppost piled up like a white beaver hat on the picnic table, or somewhere slowly falling into the brook to be swallowed by water, then you have seen beauty and known it for its transience. And if you have gone out in the snow for only the pleasure of walking barely protected from the galaxies, the flakes settling on your parka like the dust of just born stars, the cold waking you as if from sleeping, then you can understand how. More often than not, truth is found in silence. How the natural world comes to you if you go out to meet it. Its icy ditches filled with dead weeds, its vacant birdhouses and dens full of the sleeping. But this is the slowed down season held fast by darkness. And if no one comes to keep you company, then keep watch over your own solitude. In that stillness, you will learn with your whole body the significance of cold and the night, which is otherwise always eluding you. Roland Hoyt grew up in New York State, in Tompkins County, along with his younger brothers, Ken and Robert. As Roland grew older, he became a machinist at a company called Therm Incorporated and worked there for many years until an accident injured his back and he was no longer able to work as a machinist. When he was able and more recovered than not, he took a job in a restaurant until sometime later he fell from a ladder. And that second injury to his back meant he could not work again, ever. He wandered. He went from place to place and ended up in Pennsylvania and was living in an apartment until 2 years ago when his mother passed away. And in that moment, the illness that he had suffered with all of his life, the illness of delusions and paranoia, began to grow exponentially worse. He lost his apartment and began to live on the streets, at some point ending up back in his hometown. In early December, when authorities got a call on a very cold December morning, they came to find him. He was on a street corner 2 blocks away from the town's shelter. He was just barely breathing and was very, very cold. And in the hospital, as emergency workers always do, tried very, very hard to warm him up, but they didn't succeed. And there ended his life. His brother shared with the local newspaper that he was, of course, horribly sad at the loss, but that his brother was not ever a drug or alcohol abuser, that he suffered from mental illness. And his brother didn't know if Roland had been able to receive the medications he needed or not. A friend of theirs, who was a paralegal in the town, said he was horrified that the systems in place in towns and counties and places all around us, but especially in that town, had failed Roland. That Roland was the kind of person who gave so much to the people in his life, and that he didn't deserve to have this kind of ending. And he called on the county to extend its services to more people, especially now that the only year-round shelter had just closed. The county said that services were perfectly adequate and that it was up to, and it is up to, individuals to find the help that they need. We know the difficulty of this question, and we know, I'm sure, each of us sitting here this morning or within the sound of my voice, how difficult this question is to answer. Yes, every one of us as individuals have responsibilities, but aren't we, after all, our brother's keeper? Don't we have responsibilities as a collective to those who are most vulnerable for whatever reason? I know for myself that 40 years ago, or just about 40 years ago, give or take a few months, when I entered my first room of recovery from alcoholism, I had no idea of anything other than my own desperation. And the community in those rooms, the community that spans the world, the community in those rooms taught me how to live at a time when I literally and figuratively did not know. They held me when my utilities were turned off for lack of payment and I was shivering in the cold. They took me for endless cups of coffee and even ice cream. In those days, ice cream, well, it kind of is the cure for everything, but in those days, it was considered absolutely part of the solution. And they listened to me, but they also shared their own experience of the gift of being recovered and living a sober life. And 40 years ago, I would not have known the story that would be inside me to share 40 years later. To say that without the collective, without the community, I would have joined Roland Hoyt somewhere, whether in prison or on the street or somewhere. I share these stories so that we as a community can wrestle together with what is often the cruelty that winter points out to us. Our ancestors in medieval Europe, especially in what is called the Little Ice Age of the 14th century, they equated winter with poverty and illness and death, which is not surprising. Because in fact, if during those years, as indeed is true today, if you were ill or lived in poverty or both, your chances of surviving the cruelty of winter were much less than the chances of those like me who woke up with heat in the place where I live with ample food and a car that started right up. I smiled all the way to church because of the gratitude I have for those things. I really do. I don't take them for granted anymore. Winter can whisper great hardship and great suffering for many of us. And it can also whisper an opportunity for those of us who carry brokenness within ourselves. And let's face it, at one time in our lives, all of us do, and some of us carry that for a very long time. But if there is brokenness inside of us, perhaps we can take in winter the opportunity to rest, to call on those who can and will help us and find our way, not by avoiding the wintering of our lives, but by leaning into it. There's a really beautiful book called Wintering by a British author, and her name is Catherine May. And I come back to it year after year because of the wisdom of her experience. Her wintering began on a really, really hot late September day when, because of the heat, her family and many other families were at the beach. And all of a sudden, her husband collapsed and was rushed to the hospital, and he was gravely ill. And not long after that, she had spent days and nights at his side waiting for him to recover. She fell prey to an illness that nearly took her life too. And all of a sudden in her life, things just imploded, as they sometimes do. Her child was suffering from such anxiety in school, and I don't know about you, but I have watched my children suffer that, and it's unbearable, that she had him come home. And even though she couldn't do much more than lie on the couch and just kind of look up, they talked together and they read stories together and they healed together. And when she was a little bit better and her husband was better, she and her friends, on the night of the winter solstice, they piled into their cars and took their children to Stonehenge in the middle of the night to watch the sunrise on the day of the winter solstice. And they joined a huge crowd. Perhaps you know the crowds that come to such events at Stonehenge, crowds that Catherine says she would probably never have joined out of embarrassment or whatever else she felt. And yet in that space, as she and the children, her friends and the children watched the sunrise, she felt an opening in her heart. And I want to read to you the words that she writes in her book because I thought of them so much on Friday night as we were together traveling the solstice spiral. She quotes these words from a fellow writer, D.H. Lawrence, who says this: "We must get back into relation, vivid and nourishing relationship to the cosmos and the universe. We once more need to practice the ritual of dawn and the ritual of sunset, the ritual of the first breath, and the ritual of the last." In her weeks and months of wintering, experiencing the things that she had never experienced before, she reflected on her life before the wintering, this particular wintering struck. The chaos of being a full-time teacher, professor, and writing books, and raising a child, and doing all the things, all the things that so many of us do, that just caused her to become more and more tired and more depleted, and she believes susceptible to illness. I don't know about you, but I can relate to that depletion. And in this time of wintering, she remembered growing up as a child with autism and how hard she worked every day to fit in to a world that didn't seem to have a place for her. And now, in her late 40s, she had found the space to be gracious and kind to herself, to take rest when she needed, to reflect on the chaos and know that she wasn't going to go back to that place. She didn't know what would come, but she wasn't going to go back to the chaos because it's not sustainable. and it hurts her and others, and it hurts the planet. She found the wisdom and the grace of wintering. And she said, if you're someone who has found that wisdom and grace of wintering, you have to share it with other people. And in my own way, that is what I seek to do, because I am so grateful for that grace and that wisdom. That didn't come from me. It came from people like you, reaching out to one another and sharing the wholeness that we have come to experience with those who need us. Beloveds, we are part of a faith community that believes in the collective power of communities like this one. We believe that the more wholeness we feel, the more health and vitality and calm and presence that we have within ourselves, the more we can reach out to others, not from a place of chaos, but from a place of profound and deep love. Every single human being matters. Whether they fail to wake up on a cold winter night because they are sleeping on the street, or whether they are enjoying beautiful surroundings and heat and ample food, all of us matter. And thank you, Amy, for mentioning the event last evening. I was sermonating, so I couldn't come. But thank you for reminding us that events like this one, like that one that happened yesterday evening, call us to honor all of those who we could not honor as a collective in their lifetimes. So, beloveds, I don't usually use props, but I saw this house without the light on and empty and dark, and it just called to me. Sometimes, I have moments. That is what is inside of us. That is the light we carry, not because we're wonderful, but because we are all children of the universe. And so I invite us to remember that. And in the darker days that will come, when the season of joy and hope and celebration ends, may we still carry that light and allow it to make us smile. Amen, dear ones. Ashe, and blessed be.